Namaskar.
Right.
Welcome to Saptarishi Astro Soup. Today, on the eve of Guru Purnima, I'm going to welcome a legendary astrologer who has written numerous books and whose research is right now published and also acknowledged around the world. So, by starting this session, first, I would like to pray and give the homage to all the Rishi, be it Gemini Rishi, be it the Parasar Rishi, be it any Rishi who has contributed in the world of astrology, and also the Guru Purnima. Here, the word comes with the first Guru coming into the life, that is Lord Shiva. A Vedic text and also a Sanskrit saying is that Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat, Par Brahma, Tasme Si Guru Nam. That simply means the Guru itself is Brahma. Brahma who writes your on the there is a place called there is a so-called Chati happening in the Hindu Dharma. This is because it is said that Brahma comes on the sixth day. Why sixth day? Because the sixth house is also known as pending karma. So Brahma comes down and write your naseeb. It's so-called write your entire things that is going to happen in life. So Guru is Brahma, means Guru can enlighten you, show you how to complete your pending karma. Guru Vishnu means a Vishnu who is the Sanchalak of the entire Srishti. So he can also tell you how to live life, how to well manipulate and so called if something big is troubling you, you can just go by the side of this. A big rock is there. So Guru can enlighten you how to take the right path. And Guru Devo Maheshwara means the Lord Shiva, the so-called Mahadev. So Guru is also equivalent to Maheshwar because he gives you the blessings. And there is one more thing that we tend to leave apart. That is Guru Sakshat Parbrahma. What is Parbrahma? According to Vedic astrology and many of the ancient texts, Parbrahma is the actual energy that has been on the conscious and subconscious level. We can say the dark energy, the dark matter that is actually the science is researching upon. That is Brahma. So we go down to the Guru and takes his blessings. Now, the word Guru itself, GU means darkness, and RU means who give you light and remove from that darkness. So, in this Purnima, few of the Marc Boney ji student will give the homage first, and then we will move on to Sir Marc Boney and ask Sir to actually enlighten us with his journey of astrology, and then we will move forward.
Sounds
Yes,
good.
Sandeep ji.
So, namaste, Mark. And I think there are no words for my gratitude to you. When I started learning Jyotish, the first lesson I had with you was in Germany and not Parashari. And from there, my journey started. And there were points in time, I perfectly remember Mark giving me feedback and very clearly telling me that there was some basic preparation level which was not properly done. And hence, I must work hard on that. And I think a guru's feedback can change one's journey. And it did for me. I spent time on all aspects of astrology. And today I am blessed to be where I am. All thanks to you, Mark. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and you've been a wonderful student, and I'm so proud of you, Sandeep, in terms of what you're now doing in the world of Jyotish.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, moving forward with Sonali ji, please.
Yes, my journey with Mark started way back in 2016. And before that, I thought I knew astrology very well, as coincidentally, all my predictions used to come right. And when I met Mark, and then I first learned Germany with him, after doing Germany, he said, "Do you want to continue?" I said, "Yeah, let's do Parashari." So then he started asking me questions. "Do you know this?" I said, "No." do you know this? I said, no. So let's study. So, I mean, the whole level of my astrology has gone up by leaps and bounds. I mean, I'm so grateful to you, Mark, that really, I mean, I really did not know anything. And I mean, now I can at least say that I know something because it's.
Okay, Sonali, you're welcome. And you know quite a bit at this point. Sonali is really quite a superb Jyotishi at this point and predicts
Thank
very.
you, Mark. It's great coming from you. I mean, I'm honored. I'm proud of myself.
You should be.
Yes,
Thank you.
Dhruv can we hear from you?
Namaste, Mark. And please accept my heartfelt and deepest regards on the occasion of Guru Purnima. I think your contribution to the field of Jyotish, as all your students and many people all over the world will agree, is very special and cannot be described. I mean, at least I cannot describe it through words.
Mm.
Your commitment towards teaching, your writing webinars is something which I have never seen anyone else doing it, and which is unparalleled. I have personally benefited a lot. I remember getting stuck and asking for help and looking for mentorship. I have always received everything I have asked from you. I cannot, I mean, to me, I cannot see anything which I asked and I did not get from you. So you are really a very special person for me, and I've been really fortunate to have a guru.
You're welcome, and I think you're getting there very rapidly, by the way. And I love the fact that you're doing your own researches now, you're publishing your own researches, you're teaching, you're appearing on podcasts, sharing your knowledge. So obviously the proudest thing for a teacher is to see the student, right, grow in that way, and then also become someone who's very proficient and is sharing their knowledge. So I appreciate you for that, and thank you for your comments.
Yes, Tarangji, kindly.
Yeah, namaste. Thank you so much. I would like to say that on this auspicious occasion of Guru Purnima, if I am paying homage to Mark, I think it is my good deeds that I am able to, come at this forum and pay homage to Mark. I'd like to say that if I know astrology today, if I'm able to take interest in it and advance myself, I think I'll give all the credit to Mark, because when I started learning astrology, I remember I'd done a course, and then I started listening to Mark's videos. And Mark's style is so simple, so lucid, that it really attracted me.
Thank you, Taran. We had a very nice visit. I'm always happy when students come visit me, and so that was fun. This is a little overwhelming for me, but I want you to know I do appreciate it. It's very heartfelt and it's very touching for me.
Yes, we can go on with Palakji, please.
Yeah, Mark, I think I'm not very great with words, and most of it has already been said, but I'll try to do my best. Um, I don't know, for some reason, I feel it is my privilege that I ended up being associated with you. Like, uh, just the person you are, and obviously, I've been learning from you for so many years that now it has reached a stage where it's sort of, yeah, Jyotish and astrology is there, but it's more of a emotional bond, and you are a father figure to me, and I deeply revere you, and always want to see you healthy and well. So that's the bit. Um, Also, I just on the Jyotish bit, obviously, I came to know about you through your books, even before I reached out to you. And your books, like all of us have already commented, are so simple and easy to digest and process. And they're so, what I really liked about your style of teaching and explaining things was that it's very empirical and research based,
Mm.
and not so much of mumbo jumbo which goes around like subjective things that people try to put, it's like, you know depending on your frame of mind, everything seems right. But in a research based rigor, while there are gray areas, but a lot of it, especially in terms of timing events and yogas, are by and large black and white. And so the true test of a teacher and the true test of your skills comes out because you can't hide behind ambiguity,
Well,
right?
like you've been a wonderful student. And the one thing I'll always remember about you, when I was teaching in Chennai one time, several of you were there, right? You couldn't make the course in total, but you took the train on a Saturday just to come be with me for a few hours. And then you had to leave because of work obligations. And that really touched me, right? And I'll always think of you in that way, so. And I always enjoy being with you. I always enjoy seeing you. We had a very special experience together visiting Sri, and that's a wonderful memory as well. So again, this is all a little overwhelming for me, folks. But I can't tell you how much I'm touched by it and how much I appreciate it. What I have to say is that it's all by God's grace and Guru's grace, meaning K.N. Suraj, you wanted me to talk a little bit about how I got into
Yes,
Jyotish, or my journey with Jyotish, right?
yes, sir.
Well, first of all, let me just say that since I retired from my corporate life, which was in 2012, I've had only one purpose in life, and that is the purpose of carrying on the legacy of K.N. And, if I know anything about astrology, if I was inspired to go deeply into Jyotish, it's because of him. And for that, I'm enormously and eternally grateful. I think it's an enormously good karma on my part that I had the privilege to meet him, and also in some way become a preferred and special student of his, which, I bless my good ninth house because I've always had wonderful teachers, and him among the most. I came to astrology at a very young age. I started studying Western astrology at age 22, when my first spiritual guru, a man named Goswami Kriyananda, who was of the Kriya lineage that Paramahansa Yogananda brought to this country, I was in a 2-year program with him. He called it a yoga seminary. Part of the curriculum was learning Western astrology, which I went very deeply into for 20 years. Now, fast forward to the year 1992. Most of you know who David Frawley is, right? Through David Frawley and my association with him through Ayurveda, he told me that he was organizing the first international symposium on Vedic astrology in the US, and he invited Dr. B.V. Raman to attend, and suggested that I come. I did. And, Dr. V.V. Raman was a terribly dignified man. I was deeply impressed by him. He gave his speech, but he didn't consult and he didn't teach. So I can't say that as a result of that, Jyotish really grabbed me, right? But then the next year, David Frawley, for the second International Symposium on Vedic Astrology, invited K.N. And actually, I wasn't going to go. And then a friend convinced me, so, no, Mark, you have to see this man, And oh my God, I'm so glad that I did. And, some of you, if you don't mind, I'll just briefly tell the story that you've probably all heard of my first encounter with K.N. So he gives his speech. There's hundreds of people in the audience, right? And at the end, he says, anyone who wants to discuss Jyotish with me, please come up to my hotel room. Well, I got there a little late. I looked in the room, it's completely full. He's in the corner, surrounded by students all on the floor, right? But I was determined. So I started climbing over people. They weren't very happy with me. The only spot that was available in the room was right in front of him, literally about 2 feet away. So I plopped down in front of him. After a while, he looks at me and says, do you know your horoscope? So I start to hand him my birth chart. And he said, no, please just dictate. So I start, telling him Kanya Lagna, Shani and Kanya, and start telling him the different planetary positions for me. And within seconds, he starts reeling off a series of statements in my life. First thing he says is, only male child of your parents, but you have 5 sisters. I was astonished. This is exactly right. He said, good classical education studied literature. And yes, I had a very good classical education, went to private schools that my parents paid for, and studied, was an English literature major in college. It goes on like this. I won't prolong this, all right? It goes on like this. And I'm just thinking, now, wait a second, this man's either psychic or this is a form of astrology I never imagined. So the next day, he had just written a book and brought it to the US called Planets and Children. You all know this book. It's about the techniques that his mother taught him for timing the birth of children. His mother specialized in two questions. Young girls would come to her and she would tell them when they were going to get married and when they were going to have children. So I took this course and then went back to San Diego area where I live, and somehow the word got out that Mark can now predict when you're going to have a child. So I get a call from a woman who'd been having trouble conceiving. She had done the in vitro process, it hadn't worked, and she wanted to know if I could tell her when she was going to have a child. I said, well, I'm a beginner. I'll give this a try. I actually spent about most of a day applying all his techniques, looking at everything and so on and so forth. And I told her, this was in the fall, and I told her that I thought she was going to become pregnant and give birth the next year, maybe about towards the end of summer. And then I forgot about it. So this was back in the day of answering machines. So I get home from work one day and I have this message on my answering. It says, Mark, this is so-and-so. I just want you to know I gave birth to this child right in the time frame that you told me. And I said, really? Now, I don't know whether it was beginner's luck, but I don't think it was, because using the same techniques, I've since then been able to time the birth of many, many children. So this was my first experience with Jyotish. And I must tell you, in my school years, I did well because my parents insisted that I do well, but I was kind of a lazy student, right? But I never really became a student until I found Jyotish. And so after meeting K.N. Rao, whenever all my spare moments, when I wasn't having to work the job that was making me a living, I was immersed in Jyotish. I was reading his books. I was everywhere he went in the US. I was there in the class, and I started studying the classics and so forth. I really got passionate about Jyotish. So, but I never was becoming a professional astrologer. I was working my corporate job, but I was always deeply immersed studying Jyotish. One thing I want to mention, though, there was a group of us in San Diego that K.N. Rao met that he referred to as his San Diego team. And so he came here twice. And it was an incredibly memorable experience that I didn't even appreciate at the time. There was just 5 of us in an informal living room setting with him teaching us starting at 9 o'clock in the morning and ending at 9 o'clock at night. So for 12 hours. He was with Dr. Charak, a close associate of his at this time. In fact, by the 3rd day, he had spoken so much that he kind of lost his voice, and Dr. Charak had to take over. He talks about this. He still, one time when I went to be in the international program, he spent the first part of the introduction of the whole thing talking about this group of people and me and this experience. It was so precious. I didn't even realize at the time how precious it was to have this man, teaching us personally, just a small group for a period of 3 days for 12 hours a day. So that's my, when I say I have some really good karma with K.N. Rao, sort of this is what I remember, right? And then, he stopped coming to the US, so the mountain had to go to Muhammad, right? So I decided for the first time to go to India. This was in November of 1996. And I thought I was going to have this one-on-one time with him all the time, and I was going to learn all these new things. But when I got there, I realized it was going to be very difficult to get any alone time with him. He was always surrounded by people. People were dropping by all the time and so on and so forth. And I started to get a little, frustrated about the whole thing. But at one point he said, now, come on, Mark, we're going to go travel together, right? And then he says, Mark, you're already technically very good. You don't need to learn more technical knowledge. What you need to do is you need to increase sattva in your consciousness by spiritual practices and develop your spiritual intuition so you can see not just what a combination could mean, but what a combination of birth chart is going to mean, like him, right? So what he did, he started taking me around to very sacred places like Vrindavan and all these sorts of things. And it was such a precious sort of experience. It's just he and I in a bus, this rickety old bus on the back roads. I thought I was going to die. Just spend so much individual time with him. So one time we're having dinner together, and I worked up the courage to tell him that, Shri Rao, I would really like to become a good predictive astrologer like you. What would you recommend? He looks at me and says, well, Mark, a good predictive astrologer is about 1 in 20,000. I said, really? 1 in 20,000? How did he know that? But anyway, so he tells me this and said, well, what do you recommend? He says, well, Mark, for over a period of 10 years, work on thousands of horoscopes, noting the individual events in relationships to their birth chart. And after that, you'll be a good predictive astrologer. Because he had shown me in his residence this bookshelf where he had all these notebooks with 20,000 horoscopes. Can you imagine? Most of them calculated manually, including the dashas, right? With at least 10 events noted. So I'm thinking to myself, 10 years, thousands of horoscopes. And then I'll become a good predictor. Well, I did that, all right? Now, I still couldn't predict like him, but at least I could predict, and particularly a certain set of common events like career rise and marriage and childbirth and the time of things that, consultant people ask about all the time. This is the basis of my book, Predicting Major Life Events, right? So my corporate career ends in 2012, so I decide it's finally time to follow in K.N. Rao's footsteps. And at first I was doing a lot of consulting, but it was very draining. It was occupying all my time. I wasn't doing any teaching. I wasn't doing any writing. So in 2016, I made the decision I'm not going to consult for the general public anymore. I'm just going to teach. I'm just going to write. And I'm going to write in his style. So many of you may know that K.N. Rao's father was a very famous journalist. And he taught him how to write in an engaging and interesting way, right? Because quite frankly, folks, a lot of astrological writing is almost unreadable, right? and just boring, and just not engaging at all, right? So I decided both in my teaching style and in my writing style, I was just going to copy K.N. Rao. This is why I say that I'm a pale imitation of K.N. Rao, right? But even a pale imitation of K.N. Rao makes an indelible impression, right? So you've all mentioned that I write clearly, I write, in a way that, it's understandable. And really, I wrote, except in one exception. Now, K.N. Rao sometimes personally didn't explain how you got from A to D, right? You had to sort of figure out that for yourself. I decided that if I could explain it, I was going to arrive at A, B, C, D, and how you got there and explain all different steps. And I'm gratified. The comment that I get over and over again from people all over the world is that they appreciate that my books are understandable, right? And the techniques are replicable. You can take them, you can apply them yourself, and you'll see that they work. And, like you mentioned my empirical approach, that was his approach, right? He was a scientist. He was an empiricist, right? So he revered the classics and what they said, but he also wanted to know what these combinations meant in the light of the modern era, right? So the 11th Lord and the 12th doesn't always mean you have no gains, right? It can mean you have income from foreign students. I have the 11th Lord in the 12th. I have income from foreign students, right? So the new meaning of combinations as they are, and that's research. That's research. But then, just classical principles. Now, Suraj, you were saying the problem in the world today of Jyotish is the YouTube, right?
Yes.
In the sense that you've got all these people presenting, they all pretend to have some secret technique that only they know, right? And then, so you have these totally beginning people who know nothing about Jyotish. They're hearing these sort of things, right? They don't know how to discriminate good information towards bad information, right? Nobody or lots of people aren't learning in a very systematic step-by-step way. I'll tell you a story about that. When I was first invited to teach in Russia with K.N. Rao, an associate of his, Deepak Basario, this was in 2013. At the last minute, K.N. Rao couldn't go. And so it was just myself and Deepak Basario. Basario liked to consult, I liked to teach. So I did most of the teaching, right? And there was a man there that came with us, a man who had been, he was a millionaire. He could just do what he wanted. And he would come to, he was studying Jyotish for 10 years. He'd been involved in Jyotish for 10 years. So he sees me present. But the thing is, he couldn't interpret a birth chart and he couldn't predict. He had all this sort of disparate information that he couldn't do anything with really in any sort of effective way. So he saw me present. And then at the end, he said, Mark, I want to be your student, but I want you to treat me as complete beginners from the very start, from the basics, because he'd never built a good foundation. He never had basic classical principles, right? It's like trying to read Shakespeare before you know the alphabet. It's like trying to live in the upper story of a house before you've built the foundation. It doesn't work, right? I've seen it over and over and over again. So he did that, and he started taking private tutoring from me, going through, starting with my book, Jyotish for Beginners. You know, you learn from the ground up, and relatively soon, because he had absorbed a lot of other information, pretty soon he could interpret a birth chart accurately, and he could predict, right? So, you know, this is the problem in the world of Jyotish today. That people don't learn in the systematic step-by-step way from the ground up, right? Before they get into very sort of advanced comments. Sandeep said he jumped into Germany before he had a good foundation in Parashari, right? You can do it, but you're handicapped at that point, right? So he realized he needed to go back. And, you know, I realized that at one point, I realized it myself. You know, I was jumping into all these. I didn't know who was a good teacher, who wasn't a good teacher. So at the initial conferences, I was absorbing all this stuff, you know. But, you know, when I met K.N., I said, okay, now I'm not going to listen to anybody else. I'm not going to read anybody else. I'm just going to study with him. And I realized I needed to take a step back and really learn Jyotish again from the ground up. And that served me very, very well, right? So that's probably more than you wanted to hear. But
Definitely,
that's,
sir. I was getting goosebumps while you were
as they
telling.
say, the rest is history. 35 books lately, later, over 96 articles later. You know, I have a compulsion to write about Jyotish. I'm running the Dasha of the Fifth Lord, and it's got the aspect of Jupiter, and I can't help but just write about Jyotish. That's what I do. But I lay it all at the feet of K.N. Rao. Every one of my articles, every one of my books, you know, saying it's him who was my inspiration. He ignited in me the Jyotish Vidya, and it's been a burning flame ever since. And I imagine it will continue to be until I expire. So there you go.
The entire time while you were speaking, I was having a goosebump. If you can see, entire my skin was having a goosebump. This
Well,
is
I'll tell you,
actually
let me tell you one more
yes,
K.N. Rao story, right? So
yes,
I told you
please,
I was
sir.
traveling him. He's taking me around to sacred places. We end up in Vrindavan, and he took me to this particular small little temple. You know how they can be in India, can just be just a little, you know, sort of thing, right? Nobody was around. It's getting close to sunset and therefore arti. All of a sudden, all these sadhus start coming out of the forest, right?
Yes,
And then when they performed the arti, and it was kind of a special thing where there was the movements in the group, and they're sort of guiding me just with their eyes, not with verbally, to kind of do what to do. It was the most sacred, special experience you can imagine. Afterwards, in the hotel room, K.N. Rao looked at me and said, Mark, no other student has had this experience with me. And it was just a hugely, hugely special moment to it. It was probably in many ways, you know, the most sacred moment I can experience in my life, except for some internal experiences that I have, right? And I had this with K.N. Rao. This is my great blessing in life.
great, sir.
Okay, that gave
The
me good.
great yes, actually, sir. I would like to firstly, initially also say all my viewers and the your student because I will not call you by name because it's I'm way much lower right now in terms of knowledge to call you by name. So I will just refer with the word sir to you. The main essence of this Guru Purnima, we were here to give you homage, and the thing that you have shown us, the people say you are so humble. The entire homage has gone to Sir Shri K.N. Rao. Definitely, sir. I was moved with all your experience of life. Now, moving forward, you have answered my first question, how to learn astrology, that you have to make the base strong. Second, sir, there is a trend right now going on with the part of remedies, that they are doing this and that, many other the books. I will not give the name of a particular book, but definitely they are using the remedies like they are consuming the normal Disprin or paracetamol. So how would you guide the new people seeing this video, and also the astrologers who are giving out remedy without having the sense of remedy? Because can a remedy be generic for a person? Can it be a generic remedy for all? If yes, then can it be few or can it be all? Means entire remedy can that be generic like they are giving out in YouTube?
Well, of course, this is a big topic, right? And I would agree with you that what's happening in the name of remedies is deplorable sometimes, right? But well, first of all, we have to understand, what is Jyotish? I mean, one way of thinking about it is a method for diagnosing karma, right? It's a method for diagnosing karma. What karma
Yes, sir.
is, what parabdha karma is a person destined to experience based on their birth chart, right? And so, when we use the word diagnose, it brings to mind a doctor, right? Why does a doctor diagnose? He diagnoses in order to prescribe. So we have this prescriptive side of Jyotish, which is very important. I mean, the rishis, the ancient rishis who cognized this science, if they didn't think that karma could to some degree be modified, there wouldn't be this idea of remedies, right? And then in the
Definitely,
yoga,
sir.
and then in the Yoga Sutras, in the second pada, there's Heyam Dukam Anagatam, which means to avoid the danger yet to come. So through our Kriyaman karma, through our actions in this lifetime, we can, to some degree, impact our Parabdha karma. This is the idea, right? And it's a very valid idea. But it's also important to understand that there's different degrees and intensities of karmas. You all know this. The ancient classics talk in terms of fixed, firm, and flexible in terms of different intensities and degrees of karma. So a karma that is rather flexible, right, which can be seen in the chart in certain ways, is more amenable to actually being modified as a result of an upaya, right? Some very fixed karma will probably not be able to be modified in terms of its external manifestation. We may be able to change our internal relationship with it. All right. I'll use the example of a woman who, has a difficult karma with regards to relationship. And she has a Dushkriti yoga. Everyone knows what Dushkriti yoga is, an unfavorable pattern related to the seventh house. It happens to be a particular bad one, right? And so, she asked me for an upaya once, a remedy with regards to this, but I explained to her that, changing this was going to be challenging, but why not try, right? And so she did the upaya for a period of 40 days, and nothing changed in terms of the external. No person came into her life, but she said, Mark, something remarkable has happened. I no longer suffer from it. I'm no longer obsessed with the idea that I don't have a relationship in my life. Something changed internally. So this is what I'm talking about. And, I have wonderful K.N. Upaya stories, and I have some of my own stories. So it's not as if, but, you have to know about how to approach the question of upaya, right? So
Definitely,
of
sir.
course you can give an upaya based on a particular problem in a person's life, a particular difficulty, one way in which they're suffering, right? And you can apply, you can choose to give an upaya based on that. Or of course you can give an upaya based on the particular period that they're running. I have been running the 19 years Saturn period. Shani, be kind to me. So everyone probably knows that a traditional antidote to any evils that Saturn can give is the chanting of the Hanuman Chalisa, right? So Hanuman Bhakti. So this came out in a Brigger reading that I got when K.N. Rao took me to the Brigger reader. And afterwards, he made this was back in the day of cassette tape. So he makes a cassette tape of him chanting the Hanuman Chalisa. So when I got back to the US, of course, I have a commute in my car going from work. I have a cassette recorder in my car. I listened to that and chanted along with it so much that the cassette eventually broke, right? But ever since then, I have been a daily Hanuman Bhakti. And there's no way I can say for sure, but I firmly believe that it has enhanced what the Saturn period can bring me and has modified any ills that it can bring me, right? And when we say modified, what does that mean? Say there's the potential of a person having an accident, say an automobile accident, and suffering a serious injury. So it may not prevent the accident from happening, but instead of going through the windshield and getting severely injured, you get a bump on the head. This is what I mean by modifying the intensity of the karma. And there's a wonderful K.N. story about this. So one night he was a night owl, and he had all these notebooks. He had them out on the floor. He was using the charts to research them, all this sort of thing. And one page in the notebook kept opening up that he didn't. Of this upaya, that is the chanting of the Hanuman Chalisa as an upaya for the Saturn major period, has been, quite beneficial for me. So in other words, one of the approaches to upaya is to see the period that the person's running and to give some planetary period and give an appropriate upaya that way. Now, you mentioned, of course, any planet, not just Saturn and Rahu, can bring suffering in a person's life, depending on the condition of that planet, right? So we need not just upayas for Saturn and Rahu, but also for all the grahas. I've written an article called Graha Shanti. I think certainly Sandeep and Pulak have gotten this. But of course, if you went to K.N. Rao and you said, well, what's the absolute best upaya can give all purpose, right? Of course, he would say what, Pulak? What would he say?
He will say Vishnu Sahasranam.
He'd say Vishnu Sahasranam, right? Which he's been chanting, God knows, how long, because he's 94 years old. I've had the privilege many times of being at his residence where on every Wednesday night, a large group of people would squeeze into the small space and would chant with him. I don't know how many thousands and thousands of individuals going through his program have then, been turned on to the idea of chanting the Vishnu Sahasranam as and he confessed to me once that he's always had a hidden agenda teaching Jyotish. His hidden agenda is to get people started doing spiritual practices, right? And of course, that's been the case, to an enormous degree, including me, right? So, there are all purpose, for example, if I have a good friend, unfortunately, who's been in intensive care, he's in a real health crisis at the moment. I'm doing Mahamritryunjaya mantras for him, right? And so you can select an appropriate upaya, is what I'm saying, based on the individual chart, the individual period that a person's running. And there are different approaches. Now, what he always sort of scorned was the idea of gemstones as an upaya, right? And the thought that you can, change your karma significantly just by putting on a gemstone, someone's fooling themselves, right? And of course, it's kind of a rich man's game to begin with, because supposedly in order for a gemstone to have an effect, it has to be of a certain size and a certain, purity. And if you can afford such a thing, then you're usually a rich person. So, and these are not given in Parashara. If you look at Parashara, the type of remedies actually fall into like 4 different categories. There's mantra and stotra recitation. There's homa, right? There's dan, that is, charity. And there's tapas, different forms. You talked about fasting, right? Fasting on Tuesday as a type of upaya.
Yes.
I do it on Saturdays, right? As a type of upaya. So, these are the different things. But, people expect to maybe do them a couple of days and there's going to be a big change in their life. That's not going to happen. If you look at the stories in the Mahabharata of, people doing these kind of practices, they sustain them over so many, many years in order to bring about some sort of significant sort of effect, right? So these have to be sustained over time for a period. And you never know really if the upaya is having effect, because you don't know what would be happening if you didn't do the upaya. So in that sense, it's rather a matter of faith, but I have faith in the rishis. These things would not be a part of the tradition if they didn't have some efficacy, right? So this is what I'd have to say about that.
Definitely, sir. And there is a question. You mentioned that K.N. Rao, sir, his agenda was to make people go into spiritual practices. So,
Right.
what does he suggest, or what does, sir, you suggest for an astrologer to do spiritual practices? What type of spiritual practices, or what kind of, and how to pursue that?
Well, if you're talking about what will potentially enhance your astrological abilities, if that's what the question is, again, a very significant experience with K.N. Rao is when he took me to this Brigger reader who made 46 statements about my life, 18 of which were past oriented, many of them quite true. But this was in 1996. It came out in this reading that I would start a school of astrology. I would write many books. These books would be popular. I would earn well from them. All basically it predicted my astrological career. Now, remember, this was in 1996, and this astrological career didn't start until 2012. And one of the amazing statements that came out, it said, this was an exact quote, your international tours will be many. I've taught in Russia, I've taught in Japan, I've taught in India, I've taught in Bulgaria, right? I've taught in Turkey. I was going to Russia twice a year until COVID. So my international tours will be many. So it all came true, right? But one of the things that mentioned it said my astrological abilities could be increased if I chant Aditya Hridayam, from the Ramayana, right? It's a stotra basically to the sun, but to the sun as the symbol of the spirit within, of the Atman within. It's what Ramana is told by the sage Agastya to chant before he encounters and deals with in the battle with Ravana, where it's like good against evil, right? So and of course, the sun rules sight, it rules vision, our ability to see physically, but also have to have insight, right? So I took this to heart. And so a regular practice for me has been to increase my astrological abilities, has been to the chanting of Aditya Haridayam right around when the sun is the highest in the sky, right around noon. And, it came out in the reading that as a result of this, I'd be able to understand some of the more hidden meanings in the verses in the slokas, such as in the Jaimini Sutras and so forth. God only knows if that's been true or not, but I believe I've been benefited for this. And then also, there's something called the Medam Suktam, right? So
Yes.
Jyotish requires some intellectual horsepower. Right? I mean, it's such a vast, deep, profound ocean of knowledge. And so, we try to approach it with our puny intelligences, right? So anything we can do to try to enhance that is good for astrology. So every morning I chant the Medam Suktam, right? Which is a stotra, a suktam for enhancing one's intellectual ability. Essentially, it's invoking the blessing of Goddess Saraswati, right? The goddess of higher knowledge and so forth. So I recommend to all my students a regular chanting of the Medam Suktam. It has a beautiful effect on your consciousness, and also the Aditya Haridayam. Okay, so this is how I would answer this question.
Great, sir.
But any type of spiritual practice, right? Because astrology is a spiritual science. Why? Because it deals with the soul and the soul's journey towards full God realization through the transformation process. And so we all have the spirit within. It's more awakened in others than some, but we can awaken, right? And so through bhakti, in course, the ultimate upaya is the spiritual science of yoga. I've been involved in yoga, not just as yoga asana, not just the physical postures, but yoga as a science of spiritual development, right? And so I recommend to all those who do Jyotish. In fact, when you apply to my mentorship program, if you want to study with me individual, one of the things I ask is that, do you have a spiritual practice? I don't care if it's a spiritual practice from Islam, if it's a spiritual practice from Catholicism, or whether it's a spiritual practice from Buddhism. Are you doing something to try to awaken spirituality within yourself? Because if you're doing astrology without that perspective, then you don't really have the whole basis of it, right? So this to me is extremely important. And K.N. Rao basically told me that, you know, more technical knowledge is not what I needed. more developed sattva in my consciousness through spiritual practice is what I needed. I took that recommendation to heart, right? Because, you know, he talks about the different stages of prediction. The last stage he calls seeing. What does that mean? So, of course, a combination in a birth chart can mean many different things, right?
Yes,
What
sir.
it's going to mean is really not pure astrology, astrological analysis. It's seeing through your spiritually developed intuition. And this is the ability that he had. It was, you can see it in his chart. He's got K2 in the 12th with his exalted Mercury. It's the 9th Lord aspected by the 5th Lord, all this sort of thing. This was his special. And people would walk away from a consultation with him saying, this man's a psychic, which he used to laugh about because there was always an astrological basis for what he said, but he did that intuitive leap, right? He did that intuitive leap. There's a wonderful kind of tale about this. 3 astrologers are sitting around discussing a birth chart, right? And one man said, "Oh, this woman, it's the birth chart of a woman." He says, "This woman's husband divorced her." And of course, astrologers can never agree on anything. So the other guy looks at him and he says, "No, no, no, you ignoramus. The wife, he didn't get divorced. His wife died, or no, her husband died because it's a woman. Her husband died." And so the third one's not saying anything, right? And after a while, they look at him and say, "Well, what do you think?" And he says, "Well, you're both ignoramuses. This woman's husband did not die. This woman's husband did not divorce her. She lost her Mangala Sutra, her marriage thread, and had to be remarried." Now, what were they seeing? They were seeing an exchange between the 7th and the 8th lords, right? It could mean that the spouse died. It could mean that the spouse divorced. But what it did mean is that she lost her Mangala Sutra and had to be remarried. It was that third astrologer who had the ability to see. And this is something beyond astrology, right? This is that developed spiritual intuition. So this is what we need to be. This is what we need to develop within ourselves, not just our astrological technical knowledge. The two go hand in hand. Now, do I see? Rarely. Most of my predictions are based on basically an analytical process, an analysis process, right? But I've had sometimes some intuitive leaps. I'll show you an example. Saw a chart once when a woman had the 7th Lord in the 12th with the 12th Lord. Now, I knew she was a doctor. So I said, "Oh, you met your husband in a hospital?" She said, "Yes." "How did you know?" Well, 7th Lord in the 12th wasn't going to mean she met him in prison. It wasn't going to mean they met him in an ashram, right? I knew she was a doctor. So I made an intuitive leap that she probably met her husband in a hospital, which turned out to be correct. Now this woman wanted to study with me, right? So this is how it goes.
Great, sir. Actually, my 7th Lord is also in 12th, so I can relate it.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
So, well, of course,
yes.
it could be a combination for marrying a foreigner, which can mean many things. See, this is the thing, though. What is it going to mean for that particular individual? This is where your intuition comes in.
Yes. So we are just ending this first session.